section 6.3 is solving systems using elimination. So we've already done two methods. The first method was graphing. When we graph one line, graph another line, and we tell where did they meet. The second method is substitution. With substitution, we're given two equations, and you take one equation and plug it into the other. And then you keep solving the problem. The last of the three methods is called elimination. Elimination. Elimination means exactly what it sounds like. We're going to eliminate a variable. We're going to get rid of one of the variables. We want to get rid of one of the variables so that we can solve out the problem. Now, there are a few keys to the elimination method. First thing, all the variables should be lined up on top of each other. All the variables should be lined up on top of each other. Meaning, if you look at the example that we have, x's should be lined on top of x's. The y's should be lined on top of the y's. X's should be on top of each other. Y's should be on top of each other. Second thing, you must have opposites in order to eliminate a variable. What does it mean for something to be opposites of each other? What does it mean for something to be an opposite? What does it mean for two numbers to be opposites of each other? There you go. So opposites mean the same number, different sides. Same number, different sides. So that means in this example that's next to it, the y's are opposites of each other. That's what we want. We want one of the variables to be opposites of each other. We want one of the variables to be opposites. We want one of the variables to be opposites. Now, sometimes that's going to already happen for us. There will be other times where it's not happening for us, and we're going to force them to happen. So with elimination, sometimes we're going to force the problem to work. If the problem doesn't want to work as given, okay, fine. We're going to force them to work then. Sometimes we're going to have to use a little force. And there are three ways to force it to work. Multiplying by -1, which we'll do in a bit. Multiplying one equation by a multiple. Or multiplying both equations by multiples. Sometimes we have to use a little bit of force to make the problem work. So sometimes we have to use a little bit of force. Any questions on what we're getting ready to do? So let's do some work there. So we're going to look at each of the following examples. We're going to do one of each type. We're going to do the basic example, and then we're going to do the forcing examples. We're going to do a basic example, and then we're going to do 3 examples in which we're going to force the problem to work. So notice that each of the examples that we're going to be doing has a title for it. That way, you have something you can go back and reference in your notes. Now, for those people who have already signed up for hybrid, once we transition into hybrid, you'll start receiving the notes packet, which is basically the packet of all the notes for the unit. So basically what you're printing off now, you'll be given to you, so you'll already have the full packet of notes. Those of you who are staying remote, these packets are the packets that are left at door 12 that you can always pick up so that you have the same packet. So they're not getting an advantage over you in that regard. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, remember what Greg said when I asked, what does it mean for something to be opposites? So, in order for something to be opposites, opposites mean same number, different signs. You must have one variable with the same number and different signs. We need that in order to elimination to work. So let's start with a problem that's already set up for us. Example 1. X minus 2y equals negative 19. 5x plus 2y equals 1. One of the variables is already an opposite. One of the variables are already opposites of each other. Those two. Those are opposites already. Point blank, period, end of discussion. They're already opposites. So now, this is how we solve the problem. So this is how we solve the problem if they're already opposites of each other. Oops, I don't need to be highlighted anymore. So first, opposites cancel. Opposites cancel out. Add everything else down. Add everything else going down. So we add everything else up going down. So that means you're going to do x plus 5x, which is 6x, and negative 19 plus 1, which is negative 18. Everything else up going down. Questions before we continue? You got a question? I see you're off mute. All right. So 6x equals negative 18. That's easy enough. What do we do to both sides? That's an easy equation. 6x equals negative 18. What do we do to both sides? Divide by 6. Thank you, Alyssa. Appreciate your life. Divide by 6. X equals negative 3. Any questions before we continue? All right, so we got x. So we know that x is equal to negative 3. What do we need to do to get y? How are we getting y? We're not just done with the problem. If you solve one part and not the other, that's bad. So what do we have to do to get y? Plug x into one equation. So take your x value and put it into one of the two equations. Does it matter which one you put it into? No. So I'm going to pick the first equation because I felt like it. I'm going to choose the first equation because I felt like it. First equation was x minus 2y equals negative 19. So take negative 3 and plug it in. So add 3 to both sides. So negative 2y equals negative 16. Divide both sides by negative 2. So y equals 8. So x equals negative 3, y equals 8. So your answer is negative 3, comma 8. So it's not hard. It's just a little bit of work. Not hard, it's just a little bit of work. Any questions before we continue? Any questions before we continue? Yeah, remember, if you have a question, you have to make sure you ask, especially since Mr. Lowe can't read your mind. Let's go on to example number 2. Example 2. So the category of this problem is elimination by multiplying by negative 1. So elimination by multiplying by negative 1. So remember, in order to have opposites, we need the same number, we need different signs. Same number, different signs. So which variable, so here are the x's and here are the y's. Which variable has the same number? Which letter has the same number? Which letter has the same number in front of it? This part should be easy to identify. And that would be x. So x has the same number, but the signs aren't the same. That's a positive 2. That's a positive 2. Well, Mr. Lowe, I thought they're opposites. One is a plus and one is a minus. This plus and this minus belongs to the y's. If they belong to the x, it would have been in front of it. The plus and the minus belong to the y's, not to the x's. So here, we have the same number. Not different signs. So here's how we solve the problem. Multiply one of the equations by negative 1. Multiply one of the equations by negative 1. Does it matter which one we use? No. It doesn't matter which one we pick. It does not matter which one we pick. So I'm going to take the top equation and multiply it times negative 1. Why did I pick the top equation? Because I felt like it. I could have did the bottom equation if I wanted to. I felt like not choosing the top equation. So negative 1 times 2x, negative 2x. Negative 1 times y, negative 1y. Negative 1 times negative 5 is 5. The other equation comes down. Any questions so far? Let's see. So hopefully Shakaya, Luke, Laron, Carlina, she's on here, Kavion, hopefully they all doing their job right now. Elimination is not on this week's quiz. It's showing up on next week's quiz. So once you multiply one of the equations by negative 1, then cancel out the opposites. And add everything else down. Add everything else down. So the opposites cancel out. Everything else you add going down. So negative 1y plus negative 5y is negative 6y. 5 plus 13 is 18. So that's an easy equation to solve. Divide everything by negative 6. So y equals negative 3. Any questions before we continue? Any questions before we continue? So now, y equals negative 3. We know what y is equal to, but we don't know what x is equal to. So if I know what y is equal to, what can I do with it? If I know what y is equal to, what can I do with it? How do I make this problem work for me? What can I do with this -3? So you're thinking that every single one of you is going to have to do with that -3. And that's plug it in. So remember, those of you that are struggling and don't understand, so I can't help you if you don't ask. So we pick an equation and we plug it in. So this time I'm going to pick the bottom equation. Why? Because I multiply the top equation by -1. I want to be equal. I'm all about equality. I'm an equal opportunity person. Take -3, plug it in for y. We solve it out. So 2x, -5 times -3 is +15. Subtract 15 on both sides. So 2x equals -2. Divide both sides by 2. X equals -1. So your answer is -1, -3. Why is it written that way? Because x comes before y in the alphabet. That's why. X comes before y in the alphabet. Any questions on example 2? So I've got examples 1 and 2 on the screen for those people who need to finish getting everything copied. Give you a minute to do that. Before we do examples 3 and 4. Examples 3 and 4, you'll get to see if you can multiply real good. If you can multiply real good, examples 3 and 4 are not that bad. If you know your multiplication is a little weak, you might need to go pull up a multiplication table. You don't need that. So, let's look at example number 3. Example number 3. One more time. There we go. So example 3 is in the screen. So, multiplying one equation by a multiple. So remember, we need the same number and we need different signs. So look at the x's. You have a 4 and you have a 5. Okay? Those aren't the same. Look at the y's. You have a 3, you have a 6. Those aren't the same either. So we don't have the same number. We don't have the same sign. When we don't have the same number, we don't have different signs. So look at the x's. Is there anything times 4 that will give me 5? Is there anything times 4 that will give me 5? No. There's nothing times 4 that will give me 5. So that's not going to work out. Is there anything times 3 that will give you 6.
Two.
That would be 2. So we can take 3, multiply it times 2, and get the 6. So that means we can multiply by 2. So this is how this type of problem works. Multiplying one equation by a multiple works like this. Multiply one equation by a number that will make one variable the opposite. Make one variable the opposite. Now you don't have to write word for word what I just put. If you want to shorten it for yourself, that's fine. So we're going to take the top equation and multiply it times 2. We're going to take the top equation and multiply it times 2. So if I take the top equation and multiply it times 2, 2 times 4 is 8, 2 times 3 is 6, and 2 times -1 is -2. So I have the same number. I've got the same number now. Do I have opposites? Are they opposites of each other? Are those y's opposites of each other? No. So that means instead of multiplying times +2, you need to multiply times -2. It's okay to multiply by a negative number. It's okay to multiply times a negative number. -2 times 4 is -8. -2 times 3 is -6. -2 times -1 is 2. It is perfectly okay to multiply times a negative number. Yes. Because you need to force one of the variables to be opposites of each other. If you multiply -2 times 3, that will make -6. -6 and +6 are opposites of each other. And that's what you need. You always have to get something to be opposites of each other. Yes, because opposites means they have to be the same number and they have to be different signs. That's required. Like that she asked, because I'm pretty sure some of you all had the same question and didn't ask. Don't wait for someone else, because if someone else doesn't ask, you're screwed. So now, you've got the opposites you need. You've got the opposites that you need. So, cancel out the opposites. And add everything else down. So the opposites drop out. Everything else gets added down. Negative 8x plus 5x is negative 3x. 2 plus 10 is 12. That part's easy. Divide by negative 3. X equals negative 4. Any questions? Because you still got to get y. Still got to get y. So now that we know that x is negative 4, what do we do with it? Plug it into one of the other equations. So you can pick whichever one you want. I'm going to pick the first equation, because I felt like it. That was the first equation that I started with. Take negative 4, plug it in for x. Once you know one, you can get the other. 4 times negative 4 is negative 16. Add 16 to both sides. Bring y equals 15. Divide by 3. Y equals 5. So y is equal to 5. So that means your answer is negative 4, comma 5. So, questions on example 3? All right, so the last type of elimination is when you got to multiply both equations. So the last type of elimination is multiplying both equations. So let's look at example 4. 7x minus 12y equals negative 22, and 5x minus 8y equals negative 14. So remember, opposites mean you need the same number, you need different signs. Same number, different signs. So, the x's, the numbers are not the same, and they're not different signs. Look at your y's. The numbers are not the same, and they're not different signs. So, same number, no. Different signs, no. Are they multiples of each other? Are they multiples of each other? So, is there anything times 5 that will give me 7? Is there anything times 5 that will give me 7? Nope. Let's go to the y's. Is there anything times 8 that will give me 12. Anything times 8 that will give me 12. That's no. So it looks like we're just stuck. Because none of those work. So now we're going to force the problem to work. So now we're going to force the problem to work. So this is what we do. Pick a variable. And switch the numbers in front. Switch numbers in front and multiply. Okay, so Carnegie, I'm going to call on you. Pick a variable, X or Y. Doesn't have to be anything fancy, just pick one. So pick a variable, X or Y. Anybody can pick a variable at this point. So, all right, okay, you picked you picked Y, so we're going to deal with Y. So, pick a variable. We're going to switch the numbers in front. So this means we're going to take the top equation and multiply it times 8 because 8 was below it. We're going to take the bottom equation and multiply it times 12 because that wasn't attached to it. Take the top equation, multiply it times 8. Take the bottom equation, multiply it times 12. So that's the first thing we're going to do. We're just going to multiply. So 8 times 7 is 56. 8 times 12, negative 96. And 8 times 22 gives you negative 176. Do the same thing to the bottom. 12 times 5 is 60. 12 times 8, negative 96. 12 times 14, negative 168. Any questions before we continue? So, do we have opposites? Are the Y's opposites of each other? Are the Y's opposites of each other?
No.
No. So, since the Y's are not opposites of each other, we need to take the 8 or the 12 and make it negative so that we can force the signs to switch. So I'm going to change the 8 to a negative 8. So make a note for yourself. Make one of the numbers negative if the signs are still the same. So negative 8 times 7 is negative 56. Negative 8 times negative 12 is positive 96. Negative 8 times negative 22 is positive 176. So now we got the opposites that we need. So now we got the opposites that we need. questions before we continue? Yeah, don't wait until you're doing at home doing it by yourself. I can't reteach you. Can't reteach you a lesson from home. Well, me being at home. At that point, you got to use the video that I upload. So don't wait until that happens. So opposites drop out. Negative 56 plus 60. That's 4. 176 plus negative 168. That gives you 8. This is when it's real good to have that calculator. Divide both parts by 4. X equals 2. This is when it's real nice to have a calculator. Any questions before we finish example 4? And if it's hard, think to yourself, am I asking questions so I can get the help that I need? If the answer is no, then you can't really complain either. So, since we know what x is equal to, we take an equation, and we so plug it in. I'm going to pick the top equation. You always pick the equation that you started with. Always use the equation that you started with. If they gave you at the start of the problem. So 7 times 2 is 14. To get rid of 14, you need to subtract 14. Remember, that minus sign belongs to the 12. The minus sign belongs to the 12. And then divide by negative 12. So y equals 3. So your answer is 2, 3. And it's not a hard problem, but it is going to make you think. It's not a hard problem, but it is going to make you think. Make you think about a few things, about what you're doing and what you know and what you don't know. Any questions on example 4 before we close it on up? I appreciate. Go ahead. So if you had picked x, then you would have multiplied the top equation by 5 and the bottom equation by 7. But it doesn't matter which letter you pick. If you have questions and you get stuck, you have to ask. That's part of being a high school student. If you don't ask, the teacher gets to assume you know what you're doing. You get to assume that. So, take that.